Okay, class, so now that we've taken care of all the regular business, I will now start covering Chapter 9, which is the adjudication process. And remember that the adjudication process in criminal court is called the trial, or in criminal court also called the trial. First of all, I want to address first offenders and repeat offenders. First offenders are criminals who have no previous criminal record. They have maybe committed other crimes, but they have never been arrested or apprehended. And as a result, when they're apprehended for the first time, they are considered first-time offenders. Repeat offenders, on the other hand, is any juvenile who has been arrested, convicted for a previous offense or previous offenses. Those are what we call previous offender, they are what we call repeat offenders. So they have a history of criminality, and many times it could be a number of offenses or it could be multiple offenses. Secondly, now I want to address aggravating circumstances and mitigating circumstances. And aggravating circumstances and mitigating circumstances are very important because everyone in the criminal justice system considers them, particularly the courts. Aggravating circumstances are usually those actions that tend to intensify the seriousness of the act. They are factors that may enhance the severity of the disposition, which is the term we use in juvenile court, and in adult court we call it the sentence. They can include the following, but are not limited to the following. Number one, it can be the brutality of the act. How violent was the act? Secondly, death or serious bodily injury to one or more victims. So oftentimes we may have one victim or we may have a number of victims. And also we consider an aggravating circumstance the prior record. How extensive is the person's prior record? What does the prior record include? What kind of crimes? Also, another aggravating circumstance is, was a minor on probation at the time of the offense? And if the minor was on probation, what was he or she on probation for? And additionally, another aggravating circumstance was a minor unwilling to accept responsibility for his or her behavior. Now I want to address mitigating circumstances. At the other end of the spectrum, mitigating circumstances are those factors that might weigh in the minor's favor. These circumstances might lessen the seriousness of the act as well as the disposition imposed by the court judge. Mitigating circumstances may include the following, but are not limited to. Number one, minor accepts responsibility for his or her own behavior. So immediately he says or she says, I did it, I accept full responsibility. It may also, another mitigating factor may be lack of a prior record. They have no prior record. And another mitigating factor is lack of criminal sophistication. Also, another mitigating factor is, did the minor cooperate with authorities when he or she was apprehended? And also, the minor's age, the more youthful they are, it's considered a mitigating circumstance. So those are examples of mitigating and aggravating circumstances. Now I want to address risk and needs assessments instruments. And so, first of all, risk needs assessments are devices that attempt to forecast one's potential for violence or risk to others. How likely is it that the minor is going to reoffend? Some risk factors for recidivism, remember recidivism is reoffending. They may include the number of past offenses, the young age at first offense. For example, we don't expect an 11-year-old to be arrested for homicide because we expect that 11-year-olds are out having fun or playing on their phones. But occasionally we do see that. And another risk factor is lack of success in previous attempts at treatment or interventions. So those are some risk assessment factors. Now I want to talk about needs assessments. Besides measuring a juvenile's potential for risk, juvenile justice practices must know the type of problems juveniles may have had or presently have. Are they alcohol or drug dependent? 2, do they have psychological problems? Have they been receiving psychological counseling? Is there a psych evaluation? And do they suffer from problems at home or at school? Is there a history of abuse in the home? Have they been harassed at school? The thinking is that youth with higher scores on a risk assessment are at higher risk. Youth with lower scores are less likely to reoffend. This is not always the case. Finally, I want to address classification. Classification means are used by institutions such as juvenile halls or the California Youth Authority or probation to separate offenders according to offense seriousness, type of offense, or other criteria. In fact, I'm going to refer you to an article in today's Ventura Star about the juvenile facility and what they are doing to release juveniles because of the coronavirus and whether they're going to book juveniles. Much of that has to do with classification, risk and needs assessment. They are taking all that into account because they want to reduce the risk of infection. So they're releasing some juveniles. Their population is down. The juvenile facility was originally built to accommodate, I think, 500, 600 wards. They are now, their population is less than 100. Classification systems perform several important functions. For example, they use